Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Knowledge Finder. Today we've got a special guest in the building, the founder of Adpacuk, Dean Okai, a guy I met a while ago, many years back in about 2014 before I just graduated. And I hold him very in high regards because he actually gave me a flash drive which contained like some crazy information that really sent me down a rabbit hole to learn a lot of stuff when I was at the age to receive that information. So, and what I'm talking about is like videos of Claude Anderson. What's that guy's name? Jim Brown. Those kind of the motivational speakers. Wes Brown, sorry, whatever it was.
Yeah.
That was crazy. For me, that allowed me to like pick up other books and just go and learn and do my own thing. But there was like 12 gigs of data on this drive, and Dean just dropped it on me like, yo, check that out, when I was young. So that was like crazy, like a real mind shifting like experience at a time when you didn't have someone to give you, like you don't have that knowledge in a package basically. But enough of my intro anyway. Let's get into why Dean's here, explain a bit about Adpacuk, what it does. So welcome, Dean.
Thank you, brother. Feeling welcome.
So what is Adpacuk? If you could just break that down for us firstly, we'll Absolutely. Go straight into that.
So Adpacuk is the African Diaspora Public Affairs Committee, and it's a national advocacy for what we don't have. So if you are an Eastern European Jew, you have the Board of Jewish Deputies. If you are a Muslim, as a Bangladeshi, Pakistani, you have the Islamic Council. And you've got a number of these national representations. If you are from the traveller community or whatever community, there's a national representation, except when it comes to so-called black. So black actually doesn't mean anything. It's a political term because anybody can self-elect to be black, just like Rachel Dolezal, which is where we all get confused. Now, when it comes to crime, everybody is uniquely aware of what black is and who is talking about.
Yeah. But
when we come to the budgets now, everybody gets confused. So on the one hand, the police can say African Caribbean young men are 98% responsible for serious youth violence. And then on the other hand, when there's 10 million dropped, say, Mopac is saying that the delivery partners for the solutions are going to be 20% African Caribbean. Now, I get confused.
Yeah.
Well, if we are 98% of the problem and we have all the service providers in the schools to industry pipeline, why can't we be 98% of the solution delivery for the money? And It's because we don't have the political advocacy to capture the money at source. So we set up a national organization. So when those monies drop at source, we as Adpacuk can say, okay, we'll take that 10 million and we'll babysit that and we'll insource nationally all the delivery partners. So those might be Manhood Academy, WYLA, Origin HQ in early intervention. It might be an Access UK or any of the employment services. It might be Mentivity or any of the mentoring organizations, but they're going to look like us.
Yeah.
So when our young men and women look out and they're actually engaging with a service provider, the service provider is culturally competent with lived experience, and that goes across education, economics, health, housing. We're not going to play the game of conflation of races anymore because we're identified by ethnicity as African Caribbeans, which you cannot self-elect.
Okay, so that's a lot of information. So let's just go through that then and break it down.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned the Jewish community having their own board and committee, the Asian community, similar thing, and I know that happens in various areas as well. So what does, for example, having a committee like the Jews or the Asians, what does that do for you? There's areas such as Stamford Hill that have a large Jewish community, but what does it actually mean when you have your own representation in the political arena?
It identifies you ethnically as an economic bloc. And this is what we aren't realizing. Because we will hide from our actual ethnicity so that we can get funding which is the tail end of funding, the shrapnel. What we're missing is our cultural capital. So we're obligated to promote, uphold and preserve our culture at all times. So if you think about an area like even Harlesden, if you go to Wembley during Diwali and try and park your car, it's impossible, because the temple, which they built for 17 million UK pounds sterling, was raised from public money and donations from the community.
Yeah.
So successful business donations, which are offsettable against taxation, has created a home for a religious community. Now, let's not get that twisted. They are all Indian. So they have a nationality and they have a religious base. But more importantly, they have a home to conduct their affairs. Now, that enabled them to act as an economic bloc and capture some substantial portion from the then Mayor Ken to contribute to that 17 million temple. Well, we're missing out on that because we're not aggregating as an economic bloc via our ethnicity. We're still identifying as black, and Operation Black Vote will tell you that black is a political term that anybody can self-elect to be black who isn't a heterosexual white man. So a homosexual white man can self-elect to be politically black and usurp our financial resources and take them away and act outside of our community's interests, but be identified as black, which is a problem for African Caribbean people because our backs are used as ladders and we're left in exactly the same position.
So do you have any, just for the people watching at home, do you have any examples of where that's happened, where we've had somebody that's identified as black and then they've got some funding?
Well, absolutely. It happens every day. When I was acting business affairs for Access UK, Theresa May ring-fenced £90 million UK sterling for so-called black and black Asian ethnic minorities. And Nana, who is the MD of Access UK, went to Downing Street when 90% of the organisations were English identifying as white, to deliver for a portion of that 90 million. Now, how does that work if the money is ring-fenced for so-called BAME? But then when you look on the terms of reference, it's very ambiguous. So because we don't have the national political, or didn't at the time, to inform on a political stage, to inform at the youth engagement stage and at an economic stage, that this money should be ring-fenced for African Caribbean to affect the terms of reference, it's very easy for others to come in and usurp our money.
I see. So for those who may not be aware or don't know at home, what is a Chambers of Commerce?
So a Chambers of Commerce is where all local businesses will come to receive strategies, tactics, further professional training, to network, and also to gain qualifications within professional industries and companies. So if you thought about not only the British Chamber of Commerce, but somebody like the Institute of Directors, they're of benefit to business owners. Now, most communities will have them in aggregate, like an Asian Chamber of Commerce, because they identify as an economic bloc and by ethnicity.
So does the black community have one at the moment?
No, we do not.
Why not?
We don't, because we're still identifying as black, which isn't an ethnicity as we believe. It is. So to put it in context, your name is. Now, if I called you Big Man, I can't write a check for Big Man and then you can go and cash it because it's not your name. It's not a legal term of reference. Now, I have to write your name, Mr. McPherson, on the check. But if I write Big Man, you can't cash it.
Yeah.
Our problem is we are trying to cash checks being called Big Man or black when we are African Caribbean. So, and in terms of the Chamber of Commerce, we are still identifying as black and going for a license which somebody can say no to, not being politically and economically organized as an economic bloc.
I'm with you. So, would you say then that's also why black people haven't received reparations and the Jews have, for example, for World War II? I believe that Jewish people still receive
reparations.
Yeah, and for certain committees, etc. But black people have never received reparations for slavery. But if there's no board, who do you give the money to? So would you say that's the problem?
So the first thing is setting up the correct vehicles. Now, when you have repertory banks and you have repertory commissions, they go after reparations, which are in two parts. They are institutional reparations, which are paid to as an economic group of people, and they are also the individuals. So when they have this conflation argument that nobody who committed the African Holocaust is alive and nobody who suffered the African Holocaust is alive, this is totally irrelevant, because that's not what reparations is about. Repertory justice is about receiving economic reparations for a crime that was committed. So we can agree that the Jews who were in the Jewish Holocaust are dead, and those who committed it are dead. Yet, every year, America sends $3 billion in US military aid to the state of Israel, which is part of a repertory package. It's also because AIPAC, the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, is very strong on Capitol Hill, which is also why Cuba has a trade embargo. It's a punishment, but is backed up with policy directly based on economics, acting as an economic group, which gives you that collective clout to be able to affect policy and put that policy into practice. So when they receive their reparations is based on one, banking infrastructure, which the Rothschilds owned, to be able to receive the funds in order to be able to distribute the funds. Now, without certain infrastructures, we are not speaking with parity. We are going with a bowl and making a request. Whereas when you go with parity and the tools, you say, just drop it in there. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm with you. That does make sense. So do you think we'll get to a state where we establish our own committee?
Absolutely. And I'm aware of this because of international delivery partners. And we do have an international delivery partner who is in an African state who has acquired a sovereign jurisdiction granted by that government, which acts in common law. So there is a town hall in a sovereign jurisdiction, not under any national governance, but under the governance of sovereignty, and working within a network of African chiefs and kings so that we don't have to deal with any government.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, it's not the first time I've heard of the idea of setting up basically a nation. The same as the Balfour Treaty signed off Israel. We should have our own treaty that allows quote unquote black people to have their own HQ. So it would be good to see that. So hopefully we do get there one day.
But it's about self-determination. It's not about anybody gifting it to us, because nobody will gift you to financially undermine them. And then once you financially undermine them, as resourceful as African people are, we are highly competitive. And then you create a balanced playing field. Now, if we look at the Olympics, when we're on a track next to Europeans, we traditionally go further than them. Now, their concern is about us frog leaping them on the continent, because there's certain infrastructures that aren't there, which means they don't have to be torn down. So we don't have to go through all of the infrastructures they have. We can go straight to blockchain and just completely frog leap their development. And they know this.
It's happened before in other countries as well. It happened in Asia. We've seen what the Chinese have done in terms of developing their nation in such a short period of time.
Exactly.
So,
can I just pick up on that?
Yeah, go for it.
So China, in the last 20 years, this is a nation of 1.1 billion, has taken 300 million people out of abject poverty into working poverty and 350 million people out of working poverty into middle class. Now, that is a phenomenal accomplishment in 20 years, and we are capable of doing it in Africa. Again, even frog leap in China. However, here's the caveat. It would have to be with a strong visionary leadership. And unfortunately, we don't have them. And we know this because none of the nations actually voted to make Israel an official oversight of the African Union. Yet Israel came in by stealth to become official oversight of the African Union, having forcefully sterilized Ethiopian Jews and expelled Africans who were seeking to stay, calling them invaders, and then setting the public against them, who burned down Ethiopian buildings. So we know traditionally this is an Afrophobic state that have just been welcomed with open arms, with the greatest spy forces funded by 3 million in a military budget from the US, which, to put it in context, is tantamount to the US's entire world aid budget.
Wow.
For one nation with a 6 million population.
Wow. Yeah, that is crazy stuff. So why would the African United Nations accept Israel as the head of the organization if they're a relatively young country, just to say the least, without looking at anything else? Their country is still brand new in comparison to African civilization, or whatever you want to call it. Like any way you look at it, they're a brand new state. Why would they be the head? Or it just doesn't. If you put it in a different context or a different industry, it just wouldn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. And herein lies the problem, that old, feeble men, bereft of ideas, will gravitate towards solutions that are shiny. We call them images of magic.
Yeah.
You go into a building, you flash a kettle, not unlike the one that you're wearing, the rose gold is seen, and the images of magic are digested.
Yeah.
Now, anything we can visualize in our minds, we can comprehend. So when Israel turns around and says, we've got to stay on terrorism, and you have African nations that say, well, we have a rising terrorism problem, it is perceived that this nation is then going to come in and solve your terrorism problem and become one of the pack. Well, because they are economically, militarily, and technologically more advanced than all 54 nations, they are going to gravitate to the head of that body. But not only that, they're going to bring in all of their spy services to completely capture your country's 54 unique states and employ all of their spy devices. Not only that, they're going to open the door to their closest allies, America and AFRICOM, who is bringing military bases into Africa, who brought more under the cloak of Obama than any other president, who will then bring AFRICOM under Israel. Now, knowing that, as a layperson, how could 54 feeble men, bereft of ideas, too old for their positions, not have that clarity of understanding?
Yeah. I'm with you. Well, they say we all know their spy services are great, but what's the saying where it's the bullet or
the ballot?
Yeah, bullet. No, not bullet or the ballot. Something bullet or the coin.
Yes.
What's the one? What is that saying?
It was Escobar. They used to say it. Silver or the bullet.
Silver or lead.
Yeah. That's the one.
But if we look
Plata or plomo.
Yeah, literally. But if we look at the heads of state in Africa, it's well known what the Secret Service does. The other guy from Haiti died the other day.
Absolutely. He was assassinated by the alphabet soup.
And there was a real good book I read. I'll shout it out in this. It's called The Economic Hitman, which actually speaks about how corporations operate and then how they interlink with governments to change policy. And it also speaks about, this is like back in the 80s or whatever, it speaks about like the Noriega era and all the takeovers that were happening in that, like with Cuba and that side of town.
Absolutely.
But check it out anyway. I'm not explaining it the best. Great book. But that stuff still happens today, and it's well-known facts that agencies remove people from power to create disruption or to bring in new power. It's a war tactic. Anyone that's read Art of War, etc., will understand that tactic. But how do we prevent, I don't know, our good leaders being killed, or them just taking the silver instead? Because from what I see, even from traveling to Africa, there's a lot of wealth in Africa. It's a lot of wealth, but there's a lot of people that take the silver in like personal gain, really, rather than like try and uplift or develop the community. And it's not even that just because they want the silver. Certain times it is
to stay alive.
Yeah, it is literally to avoid the bullet. So how do we face that challenge?
It's also perception. So you spoke about Israel being a young state. Now, MI5 was the training ground of the world once upon a time for spy services.
Yeah.
The CIA, when it was in its embryonic stages, just wealthy private men with an ideology, not unlike me and you saying that we want to set up a spy service that also had military elements, which is for the specific wet work that we're talking about, which would be to covertly assassinate adversaries through black bag ops. Set up and came to England. Now, what do they have on the US side? Plata. Silver. And in England, they just had the training ground. So those 9 wealthy men came. How do we set up a secret service that's an international spy service to annex to our government? Because all they do is outsource their services, because they weren't set up by government. They were set up by 9 private men. But it's politically expedient for the US government to use them for plausible deniability. So if you want to set up a cocaine deal with a coke baron to add to the US GDP, because you need to buy arms for Iran so that they can run them through the Contras, you have plausible deniability. Because when it all came on top of Oliver North, what did they do? Oliver North goes on holiday and President Reagan says, I know nothing. So understanding that is politically expedient for any national leadership to have a spy service that is annexed to their nation. But MI5 trained them. So why is it understanding how you protect your borders is by setting up the control of your skyways and the radar system to see who is coming in and leaving, documenting that, and having a fully fledged domestic and international spy service with military elements. Because what they also did was go into Vietnam. Who's your greatest sharpshooter? Why would you want our greatest sharpshooter? Don't mind that. Who is he and where is he? So then you take the sharpshooters, you take special forces, you take someone who's sweet with a knife, come in quiet entry, and you have all the elements to create coups, corporate takeovers, just without the paperwork.
No, I'm with you. So in that case, how do we prevent, for example, I don't know, Malcolm X, no, it was Martin Luther, they actually had the case and actually said, yes, we did it basically, and gave the family some money. But I was having this conversation the other day. How do we avoid that situation happening over and over again? And why, for example, Martin Luther, his quotes are like all over the gram still till this day. But when the case came to an end, there was no like, oh, the government killed him. What should we do about this? It was like very quiet.
We knew.
Not many people, but there was no energy. That back in the day, those people had the energy in their time. Now, it's like, do we have that same energy? And the people that do have that energy, how do we stop them from suffering the same fate?
We have exactly the same energy. So if my Sky subscription got cancelled tomorrow, people would just say Dean Okai was a nice guy, and people would be quoting my YouTube videos. And that would be the sum total of it. So here's the thing that we aren't actually realizing. Your security has to grow at the same rate as your economics and your influence. If your security doesn't grow at the same rate as your economics and your influence, your food. So let's put it in layman's terms. If you were a shotter and you didn't have your machines around you, you would be open to corporate takeover. And this is exactly what happens with us. If you raise a gun, and a gun can be your mouth and your intellectual capital and your experience and ability to have people follow you based on ideology, which is clear water versus cloudy water, you're a threat. Now, if you raise a gun, they will pull the trigger at some stage. I have been broken into by the security services. It's just a warning to say, you're being observed. And there are particular things that may be done where they leave you a symbolic gesture to let you know nothing was stolen. So you can phone the police and it's not even a thing because you haven't even been burgled. It's just to let you know that we have been here and things have been left in a particular way. So only by Africans making very big decisions very quickly to create parity, we want to create a security service. It's only a decision, right? Yeah, so the difference is, and I'll just give you this thought. When I'd lost my phone shops, I had 2 phone shops, I had 3 burglaries in 3 months. And I said, you know what? I've been running around, trying to get a clue. Nothing is happening. I got to get a job. Let me get a job immediately and not waste any more time before whatever else I have melts. Now, you could go for an interview at McDonald's or you could go for an interview at Harrods.
Yeah.
So I look immediately, and which one did I do?
Harrods.
I went for an interview in Harrods, and I worked there for 6 months, and I stacked my paper again, and I bet on myself with what I saved.
Yeah.
Cool. So everything is only a decision based on your appetites and the scope of your thinking. Now, if your thinking is a lack of confidence and a lack of discernment, you're going to make decisions that don't benefit you or anybody else. And then you're just a cog in a wheel.
Yeah.
Now, when you're highly calculating, you know the day, date, hour, based on how much you earn, when you're going to born and what you're going to do with it. That's where we need to be. And it's not that the sky needs to turn lilac and we all need to be there. It's just that those who are there need to congregate in one space so that we can actually create a critical mass where we become the influencers of the masses, and they can see the pathway and say, I'm ready to adopt. Based on the clarity of thinking, you will shoot our entire nation through the forehead with a diamond bullet overnight.
I'm with you. That's some great advice, definitely. So, in terms of that lack of congregation, I guess, my next question is, why is there such a lack of black CEOs in the UK? And I guess it does, a part of that is, it does lead into it, the lack of congregation and the lack of knowledge sharing, networking, and just like access to the network. Because there are a lot of black people that do well in high positions, etc. But yeah, there's not much of a network infrastructure to say, okay, go to that committee, they're the serious investors in the community, or go to this place to get dedicated mentorship on that. Even if it is available, it's not common knowledge.
Yeah, it's a common secret, in fact. So it's twofold. So let's break it into corporate CEOs and then break it into privately owned businesses with CEOs.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of us might call ourselves CEOs.
Not many people can overcome these blockers, like that may happen in school. Like a teacher might put you down, they might hold you back in that way,
Absolutely.
or whatever may be the case. And then next thing you know, you're on a different path, and
Absolutely.
you don't even know like how to change that path. But you're there now, you're in it.
Well, you see, for me, that is twofold. So when I met you in 2014, you weren't rediscovering America for me that you would end up here. That was inevitable. I know it's just the particular pathway that you needed. And for me, at this juncture of my life, the question I asked when I closed the shop was, how do I systemize that with delivery partners nationally? And that's what the schools to industry pipeline looked like. So we take that away from the schools, and there's no more need to speak to schools about the work placement, because the schools to industry pipeline create a pathway from 3 to 21 where we create all of those opportunities with corporate firms, with executive fast track programs, irrespective, because we also deal with the behavioral correction through rites of passage, through leadership training programs, and give young people pathways from illegitimate income streams into either self-employment, entrepreneurialism, or corporate pathways. Now,
What was the advice then you would give to the roadman you were just speaking about a while ago?
here's the advice I would give to roadman, because when your man stands up strong in the morning, you feel invincible and you think you're young enough to recover. Unfortunately, today's environment is very different from what it was 20 years ago because there was a code of conduct. So today, your key spa will cancel your Sky contract because you are making enough capital, and for him to take over your food is financially beneficial, and there's no moral compass. Your ops are also looking for you. Feds are also looking for you. So your actual dynamics in which you can live in the tiny ecosystem within your borough are so small, there's no way for you to create a sustainable income. And if there is, you've got to be such a machine, either intellectually or in terms of the physical work you got to put in, you are going to get a life tariff. So I've seen so many of these over the course of my life, where the first one was a young man named Chris in Peckham. And when I'm giving this lecture, short lecture, about the limitations of being on road and understanding the concept of Kennedy's, where you want to sit in a car and be part of the 50 quid challenge, where you're babysitting 50 quid in a seatbelt in your car, which can be confiscated as proceeds of crime without any explanation as to how you gain that. Where instead of doing that challenge on your phone on Snapchat, which is giving away your GPRS for the feds to come and kidnap your money and your car and all of your resources and possibly a large portion of your time, you could have been feeding that into a cryptocurrency machine, vending machine, on a card, which is totally blind, which would have allowed you to Kennedy up to go into a legitimate income stream. Now, for instance, if I, and I'm not a financial advisor, this is just what I've heard, had 50 grand sitting there, came across one of these machines to Kennedy up. Kennedy up is, if you're looking at the Kennedy family, their father was a bootlegger who then invested in his sons who went into politics, legitimate income streams, legitimate businesses, therefore cleaned up an entire generation of his family that took the proceeds of crime and created generational wealth. To this day, if your name is Kennedy, you are financially secure for the rest of your days, your grandchildren and your grandchildren's grandchildren, based on the clarity of thought, who was also one of the 9 men behind the CIA and its incorporation to annex and do external government spy work, not being an official government agency. Just clarity of forethought.
It's quite ironic though, how Kennedy went out and his dad set up the organization.
But he broke the rules because he went against the families that had actually put him in place. So Sam Giancana, being one of the organized crime families who his father worked with, he was supposed to make a pathway for them to exponentially grow. But instead, he had the mafia trials and his brother was prosecuting the man. So when he's laughing in the mafia trials, Sam Giancana's giggling. And Robert Kennedy is saying, "You laugh like a little girl, Mr. Giancana." And he's just, well, when he had the bullets from a 22 in him and his Sky contract got cancelled, we realized where the power truly lies. And that there was an amalgamation of crime, politics, and corporate entities behind those who were put into office. I digress.
Yeah.
So, as I have heard, not being a financial advisor, I might go to one of the islands, purchase a large swathe of land, and put up a holiday home to have a passive income, and just put a management firm on it. Get myself a mortgage in the UK because of the income stream, which would then just be paid for by my holiday home.
Yeah.
That's it. And all I am is a manager of the holiday homes in foreign. Now, these are things that I've heard. So young men got to look for longevity because in this game, it's a short-lived life. Yeah. And everybody has absolute clarity whilst they're trapping or talking about work they're putting in because you're on top of the world. Yeah. But all you got to be doing is putting your Tesco shopping in the back of your whip for somebody to come up on you while you're sleeping to cancel your contract on a hot day for you to be pulled up by 2 horses in Norwood Cemetery.
It's true. It's very true. So there, that's some advice for you. But yeah, it's a weird one because I know what it's like to, like how you can get sucked into certain situations. And I always say a lot of these guys that do get that life tariff, a lot of them ain't really the baddest boys. They're just the ones that like they got pushed to limits or dragged into certain situations and reacted in a way that got them caught. The guys that are really out there planning stuff and whatever, they're not really the ones that end up holding that big L play. You know, it's usually the guys that are more reactive. And I always think the guys that are more reactive,
Too much to prove.
It's too,
Too much to prove.
Yeah, it's a different. When I walk into the room, I can just suss it. And if you're really reactive, long story short, I think you're just going to land yourself in a jailhouse or worse. But there's some kind of attraction to that lifestyle when you're young. But then,
I know another brother who had exactly the same. I know several brothers actually who were equally as active, very active in the naughtiest of ways, but learned and got the warning, took the warning, and left the life. Now, when your heart is, and you take it that you are beating a charge, it's like gambling. The worst thing that can happen to a gambler is to win out the gate because we have addictive personalities. And I say one thing about you, you're actually smarter than me because you will have 4 brandies, say I'm nice, and leave the club. Not smart as you, I might have 6 doubles and I will leave on time, but my legs are a little more wobbly. There are those who will stay until they've drank 12 because they're just in the life, not realizing that it's closing and they do actually have to leave at some point to get home. And that's why they don't make it home.
There's a consistency to a lifestyle and you want to be living in a way where you can maintain this stuff to the end of your days. You don't want to have a one good day, one good year, or one good week.
Feast and famine.
Yeah, so when you live a certain way, I think you get, like you might have a good year or 2 years or whatever, but you're not patterned in a way that you're good for life.
No.
That's how you should be. So yeah, I would wrap up on that topic on that, but definitely that's the note I would say for any quote-unquote road guys.
And I just add one more thing. The road is governed by laws that aren't currently being observed. These are the universal laws of reciprocity. And the law is an absolute. So if you think you can beat the law, try walk off a roof with no ladder and make plans on your way down about stopping. Gravity is a universal law. All of the universal laws of reciprocity that are being broken on the road right now are the ones that are getting cemeteries filled up and life wings filled up. First of all, you got to master the rules before you break them. And people were just going out being silly billies and making a lot of noise and getting wrapped up like T-shirts really quick.
Yeah, no, it's very true. So on that note, what would be 3 key points of advice you would give your son now, like getting into this age group in this era? What would be the 3 main things you would tell him, like the code, 10 commandments? What would you tell him to follow?
Well, I've told him this since he was about 5 when he asked me where he came from. His mum said, "Why did you tell him that?" I said, "Because he asked me." "How do you know he's ready?" "Because he asked me."
Yeah.
So he's smart. So anytime he asks me a question, I'm going to tell him the truth. Don't do that with the tooth fairy. Come here. His first tooth came out. I gave him a score.
Yeah.
Second tooth came out. He ran to me. I said, "Go give that to mummy." The thing. So he knows truth from nonsense comes from his house.
Yeah.
So when I speak to my son, I say, master your art, explore it to fruition, and learn to make money from it. So to this day, he does his Blender animation. He plays the keyboard. He plays the guitar. And he's just having fun.
Yeah.
But he's mastering those disciplines where he's going to learn to make money from them. So then I show him Rodriguez, a filmmaker, who shoots his films, scores his films, has his own studio backlot in his ranch that he's purchased in Texas.
Yeah.
He made Desperados. He's friends with Quentin Tarantino. So you can see if something can be done, you can do it.
Yeah.
And you may not want to do that. But I encourage you to do what you want to do. Now be aware of the system. Fiat currency is on its way out. All nations have adopted their cryptocurrency, which is going to enslave you because they'll be able to control every single payment, cross-border exchange,
Yeah.
and also stop any payment that you make, which controls you as a person. Banks are going to disappear because it's going to be end-to-end peer wallets. Nationally, the dollar has already been adopted. The pound is yet to come, but it's being created. It's only that China is playing with everybody's banking systems and blockchains, but they're going to be here imminently.
Yeah.
So that means that cryptocurrencies, being blind, are freedom. There's Binance, learn to adopt.
Yeah.
Any little change you get, you just laying it down on the currencies that are growing. And you watch the videos to learn how that works and which coin to invest in and how that plays out. Now, I'm not a crypto advisor and I'm not an expert. So I don't offer any advice. But what I do offer is the advice of adopting the currencies because they are what is coming nationally. And the only freedom of money movement will come from those existing coins and some emerging coins, which will give you a freedom of money movement, knowing that those other coins which are national will control you.
Yeah.
And the whole point of this so-called pandemic is to bring in the new dispensation of digital controls where you have facial recognition, cryptocurrencies to fully control you in a totalitarian state, which you don't recognize because you're not in a prison with bars or walls.
I'm with you. It's very interesting stuff. So before we close, my final question for you is one that I'd ask all of our guests is, why don't black people speak about money within their own household? Or generally speaking, as a community, why is the topic of money such a hush-hush?
It's a cultural thing. And if you were to go into a Nigerian household, it's the polar extreme. You're talking about money, and then you go into an environment, you go into church and people are talking about money and systems and swapping business cards, and this is going on and that's going on. However, as descendants of enslaved people, master, shut your mouth, get your head down. Our cellular memory and our ancestors who run through our blood just have this within us.
Yeah.
So who do you think you are? What make you think you can do that?
Yeah.
So it's not about your acumen, because I'm looking at you, and by proximity to you, I believe that I'm your peer. Or just because I'm a few years older than you, that I'm smarter than you. So I'm going to tell you you're smarter than me, and you are more astute than me, because your kettle cost a lot more than my kettle. So this is just a fact.
Really?
Cool. You just separated by time with some historical facts, but we're delivery partners, so you're going to get there a lot quicker than me. In any case, I digress. What we do is we stunt the opportunities of our own children based on our cellular memory, which is learned behavior. Now, then we take that, believe that we're going to do the opposite, start off in that way, but find ourselves there in some way where this subconscious mind starts to work and deliver certain things based on our indoctrination. So people would ask me how I managed to beat the indoctrination. Well, that's the spiritual component.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at the UN, because I spoke about feeble African leaders who would look and just see coin, or look at Europeans. I watched a South African politician speaking about Israel becoming oversight for the African Union. And he says, we welcome them because Jesus was born in Bethlehem. Now, if you are of the caliber of child governing national interests, you are going to give away the continent like a personal fiefdom.
Yeah, it's a rerun, basically.
We do this based on colonialism, based on being descendants of enslaved people, and looking out and applying the Jesus concept of God to Europeans. Now, I saw this in person when I was at the National Portrait Gallery with my son.
Yeah.
Now, I took him out of school at 7 and homeschooled him. So we would go to a museum, a gallery, somewhere every week, and then we'd go and see a show like Thriller Live, Walking with Dinosaurs, this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So we're in the National Portrait Gallery, and we're in this room, and there's just pure pictures of Jesus, effigies, and there was an Italian woman in there, and I said to my son, look at this woman, speaking in Italian, and she's orgasmic.
Yeah.
And I stopped. I said, Super, she's not even celebrating Jesus. She's celebrating her. That she sees in Jesus as an Italian based on him being cast in Italian image. And I got it. That's the God
I've
thing.
been to the Vatican and I've seen inside.
That's
as
the
well,
God
so
thing.
I've seen what you.
But
what you
they
mean.
have also taken our science, which is how you create a leaderless revolution in terms of adoption. So I'm going to finish on this point. It's twofold. One, that whole system was beaten into us, and that we were separated from our culture and spirit, which is why we are obligated to uphold, promote, and preserve our culture at all times to receive the cultural capital, which is where the economic component comes in. You go to an Indian restaurant, which is a British mainstay, as racist as you are, with 10 pals from Newcastle, and they might use the P term, but they'll drop a bag.
Yeah.
And when that closes, the till, Mr. Patel will shut the till and laugh. I won.
Yeah, yeah.
But we're not doing that. So our takeaways are largely frequented by us until Turtle Bay opens up, and then everybody goes there. Key, understanding, uphold, promote, and preserve our culture at all times. But a more important part is to tap back into our spirituality and all of our systems of science. Spirituality only being a scientific system which brings us in harmony with nature. Nature, laws of reciprocity being universal laws, laws being absolutes that cannot be beaten or circumvented, which is why we're out of touch, which correlates to all of the questions of our lack.
I'm with you. That's some great advice. Before we close, obviously, as you know, Knowledge Finders partnered with Adpac. We will have our official courses launching soon. So all of the stuff we're talking about in terms of finances, taxes, even spirituality, eventually you'll find a very tailored selection of courses you can purchase on there. And they're fully fledged courses you can do in your own time, all broken up into sections. So do look out for that. Do look out for the app. If you haven't already, subscribe to our YouTube channel and share it with your brethren, share it with your people. Dean, before we close, just shout out your socials.
Yep, so it's Adpac UK on Instagram, Adpac UK on Facebook, Adpac6 on Twitter, and African Diaspora Public Affairs Committee on LinkedIn.
So stay tuned, sign up, subscribe to the YouTube channels, follow on the Insta, and until next week, I'll see you later. Take care.